The Russian River is overflowing, forcing thousands from their homes in Northern California, and it is still on the rise. Floodwaters carried away cars in the resort town of Guerneville, north of San Francisco. Hundreds of people remain trapped while National Guard trucks are taking others to safety. Our Meg Oliver's in Forestville, California, in an area cut off by the flooding.
We've been trapped here since yesterday and will be stuck until the roads reopen, which could be later today. The Russian River crested last night at 45 feet, 13 feet above flood stage. The river has risen so high we won't know the extent of the damage here until floodwaters recede.
The only way in and out of Guerneville is by kayak or canoe. The small town was inundated after the Russian River overflowed its banks. Floodwaters surrounded homes, submerged cars, and trapped anyone who didn't leave.
Normally we park right here.
This is where you park.
Yeah, it's a road.
Laura Duplessis' house is raised, but her basement and yard are completely underwater.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
No.
More than 24 towns along a 25-mile stretch of the river were evacuated. Along with Guerneville, Monte Rio is also essentially an island, and nearly 100 roads in Sonoma County are closed. An area weather station recorded more than 20 inches of rain over the past 3 days.
We're safe.
In Guerneville, at least 2,000 people are stranded. The water came up to the roof of this RV, forcing crews to reach this man by boat. One of at least 40 rescues in Sonoma County on Wednesday.
Never have I seen it like this. It's scary.
But emergency crews are prioritizing people who are in immediate danger.
We're not going to be rescuing people unless there's an imminent life safety threat. So people are just going to have to be patient.
Rachel Vasquez didn't think the floodwaters would reach her home. Now she's waiting out the disaster with her 4 kids.
Do you have enough supplies?
I think we're, hopefully going to be okay.
You can see where the water reached on this fence. It is going down. Sonoma County has urged California's governor to declare a state of emergency as the water continues to recede because more rain is expected here later this week. Vlad and Anne-Marie.
All right, Meg, thank you.
It is exactly 6 years ago that the then Pope Benedict XVI left the Vatican. It came after the historical announcement of his resignation.
In gravescente etate, non iam aptas esset monus Petrinum eque administrandum.
On the day Benedict XVI left the papal apartments, he was greeted with a round of applause from the bishops and the Vatican employees. He was then escorted to a helicopter within the Vatican Gardens, where he was flown to the papal apartments in Castel Gandolfo. It was there that he gave his last speech as Pope.
Non sono più Pontefice Sommo della Chiesa Cattolica, fino alle 8 di sera sono ancora poi non più. Sono semplicemente un pellegrino che inizia l'ultima tappa del suo pellegrinaggio in questa terra.
Since then, Benedict XVI has resided in a former monastery within the Vatican Gardens. He also took the name of Pope Emeritus to show he is no longer the Bishop of Rome, and often receives visits from Pope Francis as well as other friends.
The message is simple. Let us do our jobs. Around 10 journalists were arrested as they and 100 of their colleagues protested on the Freedom of Press Square in Algiers. A few hours later, they were let go. Leila Barato, an RFI correspondent in Algeria, was among them.
I'm out. Thank you for all your messages. Everything is fine.
This crowd of journalists carried slogans denouncing censorship and a press that merely follows orders.
We demand that the press is returned to its owners, that the press is a free press. We demand space to work, respect for our ethics to report information. Nothing but information.
Today we denounce censorship, and this won't be the only sit-in. There will be other peaceful sit-ins. But this isn't political. We just want to get rid of censorship.
There have been widespread protests since last week over President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's run for a 5th term. But the nation's media was silent, leaving many journalists angry and prompting the chief editor of a state-run radio station to resign. Media bosses are seen as being close to the government.
The decision of upper management to remain silent in the face of a large-scale national protest on the 22nd of February 2019 illustrates the daily hell of trying to do our jobs.
Further protests are expected on Friday, but whether the media will be able to report on them is another question. Reporters Without Borders, which condemned the arrests, ranked Algeria 136th out of 180 for press freedom.
Jung Pak, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. She has also held senior positions at the CIA and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, where she led the intelligence community's strategic analysis on issues involving the Korean Peninsula. And Jung, in your article on February 6th, you kind of pointed out this was going to be a long shot. And you said, pointing out that Kim has not followed through on, quoting, significant and verifiable progress on denuclearization. Did this summit, the second summit, pan out the way you thought it would?
I'm not sure that anybody thought that it would turn out this way, with both sides walking away. And I think President Trump was right to walk away. What the North Koreans were offering was really actually a bad deal, and that they were asking for what amounted to the most effective sanctions against North Korea in exchange for a small piece of denuclearization. And so it was not reciprocal or proportionate, and I think the president was right to walk away.
And critics said, look, a lot of them said the president is being played by Kim Jong-un. And in your estimation, look, better to walk away from a bad deal than to get into the deep negotiations of a mediocre deal.
Right. And, you know, I think both sides, both Kim and President Trump, were overly confident going into this, thinking that the power of their relationship would be able to wrest at some sort of concession from each other. But it really points to the fact of how important process is and how important working level negotiations are, so that we don't have to come to this situation and to have this kind of miscommunication between the two leaders.
So going forward, is there a Summit 3? What's the biggest hurdle between these negotiations?
I think there's still an opening for a Summit 3.0. President Trump, in his press conference, left the door wide open. And even before that, he said, you know, there'll be lots of meetings, and also hinted at a third summit. And the North Korean foreign minister, when he spoke earlier today, also made it seem as if the North Koreans were open to it. But I think we have to make sure that working level discussions continue to happen.
And Jung, if you're South Korea in this scenario, how do you feel about this? I mean, what does this mean for the relationship between North Korea and South Korea going forward?
The South Koreans were very enthusiastic about this summit, and they really wanted something to happen, especially on the peace declaration and the exchange of liaison offices between North Korea and the United States. And they were ready to get some inter-Korean economic engagement projects going. And so this was a really big disappointment for them, and this probably threw them off guard, as it did all of us. It was good that President Trump called President Moon of South Korea right away and explained what happened. And President Moon expressed regret that the summit reached no agreement. But I think if past as any precedent, President Moon will try to step in and try to get the talks back on track.
And we shall see if there is a summit, as you say, 3.0. Jung Pak, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Thank you so much.
Last year's U.S. economy grew at its highest rate since 2015, but experts fear a drop-off could be on the horizon. The Commerce Department released its report today. It said the U.S. economy grew at 2.9%, just shy of the president's 3% goal. Two big reasons for the spike included President Trump's corporate tax cuts, which took effect in 2018, and increased spending on military and domestic programs. But economists and the Federal Reserve predict growth will slow down this year. A big concern that experts cite is housing investment. Spending on residential homes fell 3.5% in 2018.
Pope Francis met with 10 bishops of Kazakhstan's Episcopal Conference. There are also bishops from Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. They are from countries where Catholics are a minority. It was a brief meeting, but nonetheless very symbolic. As a present, the bishops presented this image of Our Lady to Pope Francis. In 1941, some deported Polish people prayed to the Blessed Mother for help after being left to their own fate. As a result, they miraculously found a lake containing fish to eat during the middle of winter. However, this was not the only gift he received.
Y este es el primer devocionario en kazajo que se ha hecho en la historia.
Kazakhstan is the 9th largest country in the world. However, it only contains 18 million inhabitants. Out of these, 70% are Muslims, a quarter Orthodox, and 1% Catholic.
When French sports retailer Decathlon announced it would sell hijabs for women joggers, it probably didn't think it would unleash a national controversy. Several feminist organizations immediately expressed outrage at the garment, which they say is a tool of patriarchal oppression.
It's a piece of clothing that's a confinement of women's bodies, whereas sports should represent the liberation of the body.
The running hijab was also criticized by many politicians, as well as by social media users, sometimes with threats and insults. This forced Decathlon to pull the garment from its shelves, citing concerns over the safety of its staff. Many say the backlash has been counterproductive and denounce the hypocrisy of wanting to prevent women from getting involved in sports in the name of feminism.
Muslim women wearing a veil, it's an attack on feminism. We must liberate their bodies. Veiled women liberate their bodies and play sports outside. It's an attack on feminism. We must stop them.
Seen from abroad, France's reaction to the running hijab has been disproportionate. Muslim women covering their hair to practice sports is generally an accepted practice. Even Olympic athletes have been allowed to wear a headscarf to compete since 2012. And in France, foreign brands such as Nike have been selling sports hijabs without causing any problems. Yet the country is no stranger to debates about religious garments. In 2016, a nationwide scandal erupted around the burkini, a swimsuit covering everything but the face. Some say the controversies have disproportionately targeted Muslim women, a form of selective feminism, according to France's Minister for Gender Equality.
I see some people who pretend to be feminists, to support equality, yet who only speak up about the veil, never about abortion, contraception, sexual harassment, or the gender pay gap.
The veil remains an object of division among gender equality advocates. While some see it as a way for men to oppress and subjugate women, others denounce a Western-centric vision of feminism and say women should be allowed to dress the way they please.
Tension between India and Pakistan shows no sign of abating. Overnight, 3 civilians killed in cross-border shelling. Pakistan says Indian troops targeted villages along the line of control in Kashmir. The standoff between New Delhi and Islamabad has really escalated dramatically of late since that terror attack on an Indian police convoy last month killed at least 40 officers. The latest violence comes a day after an Indian fighter pilot who was captured by Pakistan after his jet was shot down was returned home to his country, made big news. That transfer held along the border between the two countries, all televised live, big audience. Pakistan's Prime Minister described the move as a peace gesture. Islamabad also released a video recording made while that pilot was in custody. Here's some of it.
I was trying to look for the target when I was shot down by the Pakistani Air Force. As soon as I ejected, my parachute opened and I came down. I had a pistol with me. I tried to run and people chased me. Their emotions were running high. Then 2 Pakistani army officials came and saved me. Pakistani army captains saved me from the people and did not let any harm come to me. They took me to their unit where I was given first aid.
Kashmir locals shared their fears over the intensified conflict, now saying that when the shelling comes, it is mostly civilians that suffer.
ये देखो ये गोले पड़ते हैं कौन मरता है आवाम मरती है सिविल लोग मरते हैं उन्होंने तो बात नहीं करनी है तो ये नुकसान किसका होता है ये देखो गरीबों का नुकसान होता है ये हमारा कसूर नहीं है उनका कसूर
डर बहुत लगता है फिर क्या करें किधर जाओ ना कोई बैंकर ना कोई गवर्नमेंट री कोई मदद नहीं हमारी की आज 5वां दिन गवर्नमेंट कोई
What more can you tell us about these latest developments?
Well, first of all, let's remind our audiences that this is the first time since the war with Pakistan in 1971 that India has crossed over into Pakistani territory to conduct airstrikes. Usually skirmishes around the line of control, which is the de facto border with for Pakistan and India, is not uncommon, but strikes of this nature are extremely rare. As you heard the Foreign Secretary over there, he did say it was a preemptive strike, and he did say that that these militants from the Jaish-e-Mohammed Mujahid, which is the group that claimed the attack that took place earlier this month in Kashmir, that they were planning other attacks on Indian territory, and Indians are claiming that 300 odd militants were killed in this attack. Pakistan, on the other hand, is downplaying this attack. They're saying that there was no damage from these airstrikes, there were no casualties. In fact, the Pakistani army spokesman said earlier today on Twitter that the Indian jets had to scramble and leave hastily after dropping their payload because Pakistani jets were gathering. So we're getting conflicting narratives of what really went on over there. This is not uncommon. This has happened before in 2016 after India launched a so-called surgical strike just across the border after one of their army camps was attacked by militants. So these kinds of conflicting narratives are common from India and Pakistan. It shows that both the countries want to come out on top.
Shreya, now this is just, of course, the latest twist in a very tumultuous and long history between India and Pakistan. Give us a bit more context here.
Yeah, so this is not the first time that tensions the tensions are always brewing between the two neighbors rather. And the last time there was a full-scale war was in 1999 in Kargil, and since then we haven't really seen a full-blown war in this between the two countries. But let's remember also what the context is right now in India. There are elections coming up in a couple of months. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been under tremendous pressure to respond to the attack that claimed the lives of 44 people in Kashmir, in one of the deadliest attacks in Kashmir in decades. So people have been congratulating him. People have been congratulating the Air Force, and even all political parties have been united in saying that this was the right thing to do. But what's worrying now is Pakistan will probably respond to this. Prime Minister Imran Khan last week did say that if India did target Pakistan, the country would retaliate, and we don't know what that response will be, but it's certainly worrying, this escalation of tensions, because remember, both those countries are nuclear powers.
We have, I think, reasonably attractive news from Pakistan and India. They've been going at it, and we've been involved in trying to have them stop, and we have some reasonably decent news. I think hopefully that's going to be coming to an end. It's been going on for a long time, decades and decades. There's a lot of dislike, unfortunately. So we've been in the middle trying to help them both out, see if we can get some organization and some peace. And I think probably that's going to be happening.
Well, that was President Trump in Hanoi this morning, saying that the U.S. is working to de-escalate tensions between Pakistan and India. The nuclear-armed rivals exchanged new fire overnight. As follows airstrikes from earlier this week. Pakistan has confirmed that it will release a captured Indian fighter pilot Friday as a show of good faith. BBC News correspondent Yogita Lamai reports from India's administered Kashmir region and has more on the history of violence there.
We're just a few kilometers from the line of control, the de facto border between India and Pakistan, in one of the last villages on the Indian side called Kalal. Now, what you can hear behind me are Pakistani and Indian militaries exchanging fire. We think they're firing small arms and mortars. Although you can't see any military installations behind me, you can hear those noises, and we've been able to see smoke coming up from the mountains just behind us. Now, villagers living here tell me that they've been hearing these sounds pretty continuously ever since India launched airstrikes in Pakistan 2 days ago. Since then, we've had India saying that they've shot down a Pakistani jet, Pakistan saying they shot down one Indian warplane, and we've had these kind of ceasefire violations at multiple points along this line of control.
Let's just go through what's just happened. I think the most extraordinary thing is the Prime Minister now committing herself to a parliamentary vote. If indeed the Parliament A rejects her deal, and then the next day rejects a no-deal scenario, that she will now go to the EU and ask for an extension, a limited extension to Brexit negotiations, if indeed she has the support of Parliament.
yeah, there's definitely been a concession today. She is now going to give Parliament the explicit right to essentially go for an extension, as you said. So that is definitely a change. She's essentially recognizing that there is no majority for no deal in Parliament, and she's kind of reflecting that reality. And all this, you have to understand the EU timetable when we're talking about this, Annette, because what EU leaders are saying is there has to be some sort of, they have to know what's going to happen on the 29th of March by March the 21st, because that's when the EU Spring Summit is held. In other words, don't hold out for some kind of 11th hour deal in the small hours of March the 29th. This has to be settled one way or another on March the 21st. That's why if you work backwards, you can see why these dates have been laid out as they have been. March the 13th for one motion, which is supporting her deal. 14th of March, a vote in Parliament, and then permission to seek an extension. So that permission would come a few days before the EU summit.
And at the same time, we've got Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, though having just heard him now speaking in Parliament, it is a little bit confusing as to what exactly he is supporting, but is seemingly backing a second referendum on Brexit. So as a result, just how committed is he?
It's really not clear. I honestly don't understand exactly what he's supporting, because people in his own party are saying we will campaign for Remain in a second referendum. I believe Keir Starmer, one of his cabinet colleagues, said that, but he himself isn't saying that, and he didn't say that in his statement today. So what is it exactly that he's backing for? Is he backing a referendum on Theresa May's deal, in which case the choice would be what? It wouldn't be no deal, because that's clearly not something Labour wants. It would be Theresa May's deal and Remain and what? Something else? Norway or Canada Plus? This is all still very, very fuzzy. I think the bottom line here is that he's still fudging, because he does have these different factions, of course, to satisfy. We heard some Labour MPs today, earlier in the day, saying, if Labour really did campaign on Remain in a second referendum, it's the end of the Labour Party in the north of England and the Midlands. Forget about it, because people in Leave constituencies would never vote for Labour again. So, of course, he does have this tension between kind of this northern, working class English Labour Party and the multicultural metropolitan London and big cities Labour Party. He's trying to keep a lid on his party, just as she is. They've both had defections, haven't they, in the last few days? So essentially both are locked in this same holding pattern.
And of course, the other confusion, or important element rather, is the European elections. So in other words, if they were to extend the period of negotiations, that indeed would be a problem if it includes June, which is when those European elections are going to be held.
And it also means, as we just heard Kenneth Clarke, the Conservative MP, saying, 3 more months of this pantomime where public loses support and credibility and trust even more in Parliament and in this whole process. And what does it actually achieve? On the other hand, if all this humiliation does avoid a no deal on the 29th of March, that is something that there does seem to be a majority for in the political establishment.
Armin Georgian, thank you for that analysis.
Pope Francis met with participants of a Congress organized for the 50th anniversary of the death of Cardinal Augustine Bea, promoter of the dialogue between Christians and Jews. Cardinal Kirkcock explained one of Cardinal Bea's legacies.
Che ha dato il nome al centro che presso la Pontificia Università Gregoriana studia il giudaismo in modo approfondito e intende garantire una seria formazione al dialogo ebraico-cristiano.
The Pope proposed that dialogue between Christians and Jews take another step and move from the offices to the street.
L'amicizia e il dialogo fra ebrei e cristiani sono infatti chiamati a oltrepassare le frontiere della comunità scientifica. Sarebbe bello, ad esempio, che nella stessa città rabbini e parroci lavorassero insieme con le rispettive comunità al servizio dell'umanità sofferente e promuovendo via di pace e di dialogo con tutti.